Welcome to this Canopy webinar about customer success. Thank you to Sue for being here and for Annie and John for being panelists today. As the attendees join, Sue, if you'd like to give an intro, and I'll keep an eye on everything in the background. For anybody who's got a question, there is a Q&A facility at the bottom of your Zoom panel, so please add in things from there or add them in the chat and I'll be monitoring as we go along. This is a knowledge share, this is a tribal thing, so we want to make sure everybody on the webinar gets the most out of it. Please feel free to chuck in your thoughts at any point, okay? Thank you very much, Sue. I'm going to hand over control to you, and that should enable you to drive everything, okay?
I hope everybody can see this. This is me. So Sue Nabeth Moore, and as you can probably gather from my lousy accent, I'm British. But I consider myself British, but European in soul, which is very topical for this month, right? So I've been living in France for many years. My husband is French, so I speak French fluently. I'm now very lucky to be living here in sunny Lisbon. My Portuguese is still appalling. And I actually lived in Germany for a year and a half as well, so I speak German. Most of my career was spent in Paris, working for international French companies. You can see some of them there. And about 3 years ago, I had kind of a light bulb moment because I discovered the customer success, the role of customer success. And this, for me, was kind of a career changer. And that's when I decided to create my own boutique consultancy company, which actually provides services to companies, mainly recurring revenue companies based in Europe, who are wishing to either define or refine their customer success organization. So that's what I'm doing right now. And so I started my boutique consultancy called Success Track Enterprise, and which makes reference to Star Trek. So I don't know if there are any Star Trek fans out there. I'm a fan of Star Trek. Hi, Annie is saying he is, and so is Stuart, so that's great. And really, Success Track Enterprise is inspired by that, and we'll be going through some of the reasons for that later on. And basically, I'm here in Lisbon, I help companies here in Lisbon, but basically any company that's based in Europe and who wants to either initiate their customer success organization or who is already starting with an initiative in customer success, but because it's an ongoing activity which never ends, then I could come in and help them. So it really, as you can see on the right-hand side, this is my professional profile. So I've had experiences in all these different functions, ranging from sales, marketing, customer service, change management, team management, consulting, project management, and more recently in customer success. So that's who I am. Let's try, yes, wow, it's worked. The second slide has worked, so that's really good and encouraging. So just to give a short overview, you've probably heard of customer success for those who are participating in this webinar. There's a lot of different perceptions around these two little words. Sometimes misconceptions around what it's all about. So hopefully during this webinar, I'll be explaining what it's all about, and you'll have a clear understanding of what it's all about. But just to give you some statistics, which were recently released by Forrester in January this year. So in LinkedIn, there is a 560 degrees increase in roles for customer success. So that could be either jobs, it could be postings, it could be researchers, based around customer success. So that's enormous, and that increases from year to year. And they also said and ranked customer success as being the fourth most rapidly evolving role in LinkedIn. So just to give you some stats, when I started in customer success, I actually started 7 years ago in customer success, and 5 years ago, there were only 70 people who had the role customer success in their title in Paris. That was in Paris. And now we're over 3,000 just in Paris alone. And I remember when I first came here to Lisbon, so that was about a year and a half ago, and there were only 2 people who that actually found who were actually actors of customer success, if you like. So I initiated a meetup here in Lisbon. So for those of you who are based in Lisbon, you can come to the meetup, which takes place regularly. And now almost 200 people. So that just shows you some stats of the trends around customer success and the excitement that's going on around this evolving role. So I said that customer success obviously has this, I would say, variety in its interpretation of what it's all about. I think really there are two definitions for customer success. The first one, and this is the one which is the most known one right now, is this being a department after the contract is signed of people who are actually partnering the clients, your customers, to achieve their expected outcomes in terms of business. So that's the first thing, and this is a function. This is the customer success function, which is a team of people which are grouped together. Sometimes they are specialized in specialized customer success roles, but it's mainly after the contract is signed. And there is another definition of customer success, which I prefer to really underline, because it's not just about a function. It really is at the heart of the company, and it really is the business DNA of the company. And it actually impacts all these different functions, which you can see here on this diagram. So in fact, the way sales are actually doing sales, it impacts the way products are actually developing and evolving the product. It impacts professional services and the way they are actually engaging with the customer. There's this traditional support role, and I'll go into this in a little bit of detail later on, but it actually impacts the way the support are actually teaming up with the customer success team as well. And for those companies who are working with partners, there are lots of IT companies who rely very heavily on partners in order to do their business. And so even the partner roles, more and more partners, for example, companies like Cisco, who have 80% of their business, which is based on partnerships, actually their partners are becoming more and more involved in the customer success approach. Marketing, of course, so marketing have always been the function which helps to really gear customers up front before the contract is signed. But now marketing is becoming more and more involved in customer success, not only for acquisition purposes, but also for retention purposes. And then, of course, finance. This is very important because, in fact, and we'll see this later on, customer success is actually redefining the way businesses are doing business. And it's a reaction also to different business models. And so the financial department is heavily impacted because, for example, with recurring revenue, the way that the finance is followed up and the KPIs which are put into place to follow that financial performance is also going to change. So it really is at the heart of the business and really makes up the whole DNA of the company.
So Sue, it's a little weird for me just looking at that circle, and that's kind of the place I would have put the CEO of the organization before. How do you see the relationship between customer success and the CEO?
That's a great question, Stuart. Yes, and I think that customer success, when it's done properly, one of the pillars and the foundations for customer success is this is a mindset which is coming top down. So if the CEO has this mindset of customer success and is able to really sponsor this whole mindset of what customer success is all about, and the whole customer centricity which is equated with that, then that's very important. So obviously, depending on the size of the company, if you're a startup, for example, and you're the CEO of a startup, then usually the customer success organization function usually reports directly to the CEO. But then, of course, you've got a bigger company, with multiple employees, then you usually have the vice president of customer success who is going to report directly to the CEO. So really very much depends on the size of the company and who the customer success function reports to. But as I said, at the end of the day, what is really important is this mindset. So no matter if it's a CEO who is actually holding this mindset, or if it's somebody else within the organization, it has to come top down to the different hierarchical levels of the company.
So Sue, how does the VP of Customer Success relate to the VP of Sales and the VP of Marketing?
Right, so that's a really excellent question, John, as well. And I think it's something which the VP of Customer Success has the challenge of, first of all, evangelizing what customer success is. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges within a company. And I think as long as you as a VP of customer success are continually evangelizing the worth, the value that you are bringing to the company, and how as a VP of customer success you're going to help the VP of sales to achieve their specific goals, then that's a win-win situation. Because
but are they peers, or is the customers, are they subordinate to the customer success manager? I guess that's your question, right, John?
Right.
Right. It really depends on the organization. The bigger organizations you can have the VP of sales and the VP of customer success who are both directly reporting to the CEO. That's possible. Sometimes you have the customer success function, which has a VP of customer success, and which can be reporting not to the CEO, but they can be reporting to the customer revenue officer, or sometimes to the CCO, the customer chief officer. So it really depends on the organization, but I think irrespective of the organization and the hierarchy which is within there, I think what is necessary is for the top down to really infiltrate this DNA of customer centricity and how everything is done in order to serve the customer. And customer success has a prime role in the servitude to the customer.
Awesome, thank you, Sue. Just before Annie comes up with his question here that I've just seen in the chat, we've had a question from Raphael on the Q&A, and he's asking, as the CEO of a startup, what's the point where he should really be initiating this customer success type mentality?
Yes, I love that question. So thank you, Raphael, for raising this. I think it's never too early to actually start a customer success organization. What I've observed actually is, unfortunately, that it started too late. I think the main trigger for a lot of companies and CEOs for wanting to initiate a customer success in organizations is the first sign of churn. That is the usual trigger for actually wanting to start to put into place a customer success organization. I think, to answer your question, Raphael, the best time to start even thinking about customer success and actually implementing it is as soon as you get traction for customers. As soon as you start getting traction for your customers and your acquisition, you should start to think about putting customer success into place. Because in fact, customer success is not just about how you are going to partner your customers after the contract is signed. Customer success, as we see on this diagram here, actually also involves the product. So if you are actually building customer success within your product, and actually you're designing your go-to-market for your product so that it actually thinks about how your customer is going to achieve their expected outcomes with your product, and so that your product becomes intuitive and your product really, without necessarily having to necessitate human intervention, because your product is so intuitive and it's so clear of how this product is actually going to help you as a customer to achieve your expected outcomes. So, I think even, for the best companies, especially startups, if they're thinking about customer success, if they can think of it right from the outset, even when they're designing their product and go to market, that's the best time. Because usually what happens is you probably have a yearly subscription. What happens if you sign the contract, you're really happy because you signed your initial 100 customers, for example, which is great. But then when the yearly subscription comes around after the end of the year, or 2 years or 3 years, or whatever the subscription length it is, then it's far too late to actually start re-engaging with your customers. If you've been silent, if you've been silent all that time, and you don't even know whether or not they're actually getting any value from their investment. So I would say, Raphael, the earlier the better.
Thank you very much, Sue. Annie, what you got? What's your question?
Yeah, so I agree with a lot of things that you're saying, Sue, but my question would be, I would say it's for early growth stage companies as well. Let's kind of scale back from, let's say you're not a VP of customer success, but you're the customer success manager in a company. What are your day-to-day operations that you are involved in look like? And in what you just said about understanding the customers and getting their feedback, isn't that the product manager's role, or a product owner's role? And how does the customer service manager then try not to overlap or step on the responsibilities of existing roles that are there in these circles, the marketing and support? partnership?
Yeah, that's another great question, Annie. In fact, what you need to decide as your role of customer success VP, director, whatever role it is, whatever title you have to define the KPIs. What are the KPIs which you need to define both externally with your customer and internally, so that you can see whether or not your customers globally are on track or not, depending on whatever solution or service it is that you're providing. So it's necessary to provide the KPIs, and that's something which you need to work out collectively, not just the customer success VP or director, but collectively, as a group, as a company. What are the KPIs that we want to measure to make sure that our customers are actually achieving their expected outcomes? And internally, what are the KPIs which we're going to be putting into place to make sure that we can see that our company is actually performing? And to answer the second part of your question, how do you make sure that you're not actually trespassing on somebody else's toes in their roles, in their function? So like, for example, the product manager or the sales manager or whatever, then that again is part of the organizational aspects which you're going to put into place and determine who is responsible for what, who is accountable for what, and at which points in the customer journey. So customer success, in fact, is a transformation of a company. If you have an older existing company, for example, even bigger corporate companies, like Oracle and IBM, Microsoft, they're all transforming right now and heavily investing in customer success. And for those type of enterprise type companies, that is a transformation. So you really need to make sure that all the different internal functions know exactly what is their contribution towards customer success, and what is the scope and the definition of how they contribute compared to another function, and how each of the functions is actually feeding each other. That's really important, because you don't have just external clients, but you have internal clients. So you need to make sure that each of those internal functions knows what are the expectations of each of the functions. For example, if you're in the customer success role, which is the post-contractual role, then you need to know, for example, what are the things which you could feed into the sales role? What are the things which you can feed into the marketing role? What are the things which you can feed into the support role, and vice versa, so that everybody within the company is in a win-win situation.
So sorry to destroy your flow, Sue, with all the questions. I hope this is working out for you all right. Just had a quick chip in from Rajesh. He's asking, really, as customer success seems to have such an important place in the success of the company, how strong should the customer success director's opinion be in the sort of mix around making company decisions, not just customer decisions? Sorry,
I didn't quite understand the question. So
yeah, I'm sort of paraphrasing a little bit, but what he seems to be saying in the chat is, as the success of the business is so dependent on the success of the customer experience, which the customer success director is looking after, how vocal should the director of customer success be in making business decisions, not just customer decisions?
Oh, right. Okay. Yes. Well, I think that customer decisions are business decisions. I think that we're actually in the age of what we call the customer, the age of the customer. And I think the customer is going to be the differentiator in how businesses either survive or thrive, or don't survive, really. And I think in the age of the customer, if those companies which are customer centric, and we're going to be looking at that a little bit later on with the slides, those customers who are customer centric are actually going to be the winners. So to answer the question, the person who is in charge of customer success, and I think customer success actually includes customer experience, because that was part of the question as well, right? So it actually includes the customer experience. We're going to be seeing a little bit of the difference between the two later on. So I think that the customer success director, because the customer is of utmost importance for the business, and it's going to be the differentiator, then the customer success director should really have a seat at the table in the board decisions, because this customer success director is actually going to be feeding in first-hand insights from the customer. It's going to be the voice of the customer, which is going to then feed into the rest of the company, so that the rest of the company can continually fine tune what are they doing in terms of contribution to the outcomes and positive business performance of those customers. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you, Sue. Annie, did I cut you off there? Have you got anything else you want to add, chip in?
I guess, so let's say from a startup perspective as well, a growth startup perspective, and a lot of B2C companies will be customer focused. And they can't really hire one person to be customer success. I mean, everybody plays a larger role than what their title may say. So is it, my question is, what is the ROI for a growth stage startup to actually have one person responsible for just customer success rather than it being shared by the CEO, the marketing director, or the product head? Is it important for them at a growth stage to actually hire somebody that has this kind of not amorphous but an overlapping role with all the responsibilities in customer success? If you
yeah, I think for a startup, Annie, in fact, there was a certain point, I mean, that it relates to the previous question as well, you know, when is the best time to actually invest in customer success? And I think there gets to a time when to do customer success well, you have to have a dedicated resource to that, your first dedicated customer success hire to do that. Because if you are growing exponentially, then there's no way that somebody who's already having the role of sales or account management or the CEO can actually partner the customers at the same time as doing whatever other function they're responsible for. So I think that at some point it's really important to make that first hire, and that first hire is going to be the person, as it's usually called as customer success manager or CSM for short. And that person is actually going to be putting into place the first organizational aspects of what that future customer success organization is going to look like. They'll be initiating the first processes. They'll be determining what kind of data is needed in order to collect about the clients. And basically they'll be starting to get the wheel churning. So it's very important, I think, to have a dedicated, specialized person in customer success as soon as possible. Because with traction, you can't do it all, it's just not possible. But usually what happens, you know, for an early stage startup, yeah, it's usually done probably by the CEO and then probably by the salespeople as well, or the account management teams. But it gets to a point when that's far too much to handle.
Sue, I really like Danny's question. I'd like to restate it a little. I'd like to ask, please describe the point in the corporate life cycle of the startup where you suggest there needs to be a person with a specific customer success job title. You know, is it at the point of first paying customer, or when they start to do actual scale up, or where would you suggest that point might be?
Well, as I said previously, it kind of relates, I think, to the previous question. I think that the sooner the better. I think as soon as a startup starts to have traction and starts to, I mean, it's difficult to give a number. If I said like, yeah, it's over 100 customers, that doesn't really make any sense. Because it really depends on what you're selling and the complexity of what you're selling and the markets who you're selling to. But I would say, you know, in terms of the journey of a startup, as soon as you start to feel that you're having exponential growth and traction, I think it's the time really to start investing in a customer success manager resource. But also, I mean, if you can anticipate it even before then, that's even better. If you can afford to actually invest in a customer success person while you're actually doing your go-to-market, then that's the ideal situation. Because that's when you're actually going to incorporate customer success in the way that you're designing your product. So that your product becomes, as I said, you know, it's something which is very intuitive, and the customers know how to use it without having necessarily to have the human intervention of a customer success manager. And the customer success manager's role is really to be like a consultant, to be like a coach on the domain knowledge of whatever it is you're actually selling. So, the customer success manager role is not really technical. It should be about the domain knowledge. And if you think about customer success and start investing in customer success right at the outset, when you're actually initiating your product and making it go to market, then you have this luxury of enabling your customer success manager to take on this more, I would say, high added value role. Does that answer your question, John?
It's super interesting how many notes I've already taken on this webinar so far. So thank you very much for that. Great questions, everybody. Can we give Sue a chance just to get back to her flow, and then we'll chip in with a few more questions in a sec. Otherwise, I'm going to end up calling time at 2:30, and we won't have got to slide 2.
We've got to slide 2, but great questions.
I am loving the questions. I'm also loving Annie's more relaxed attitude to webinars. I'm loving the coffee. I'm loving the Jardin Estrella. We should do more like this. I feel I'm in the right place completely.
That's good. So now we're actually going to take a deep dive in what is customer success, why invest in it, and a little bit of how to do it. So first of all, what is it? Well, I don't know about you and the people who actually participated. I was never very good at maths at school. But here's a very short equation of how I like to present customer success. So customer success equals CO plus CX. And CX is subdivided into UX and AX. So what's all these X's mean? If we look on the next slide, this is how it's subdivided, in fact. So you can see customer success is at the bottom here. It's this red, like a rising sun. And customer success is really, if you could start at the bottom with the yellow, CO means customer outcomes. So that's what it's all about. Customer success is knowing what are your customer outcomes and how you're going to translate getting to those customer outcomes through your solution and your services. So that's the first thing. And then if you go up, obviously we have here what we call the UX. Now this is all related to the product UX. So it's the usage, it's the user interface, it's the visual design, how that design is interactive or not. And then in some cases, you can have what we call product funneling, where the actual onboarding process and experience is actually embedded within the tool. And this can be segmented depending on the different persona who are actually going to be using your tool. So that is UX, so that's very product centric. And then at the top, in the dark green, we have what I call the appropriate experience, AX. And AX basically means how you're going to engage with your customer. So it's not just the product, it's anything that's beyond the product. How you're going to engage with your customer. So sometimes it can be the stakeholders. The stakeholders are not necessarily direct users of whatever product or services you're actually offering. And the appropriate experience is usually segmented according to persona. So that's how I define with my formula, magic formula, what customer success is. And here's a quick definition as well. So customer success is a business strategy to proactively generate sustainable outcomes and growth for customers and consequently for your company. So this is a quote. This is my quote, by the way. So nobody who said this is me.
Quoting yourself, I love it. I love it. I'm going to have to come up with some of those myself.
The reason I like this as well, I like this little image, you know, you can see the two trees, which are like two human faces looking at one another. And I like this very much because I think it's probably the first time in business where we have the possibility where we can actually really partner one another and respectively help each other to achieve our respective business outcomes. You know, before when we're actually selling in the business world, we didn't really think about customer outcomes. We didn't think about the end result. We're just selling products for the sake of selling products. And it was all very based on quotas, and it was all very based, you know, on the vendor achieving their business performance because they'd sold products, and that was it. So it was very short term. Whereas now we have this fantastic opportunity as human beings, if you like, to actually partner each other's success. So, you know, in customer success, if we are helping our customers achieve their long-term, medium-term business outcomes, those customers will be so satisfied that they'll want to reinvest in you as a vendor provider. So that's helping each other. So I think it's the first time we've actually had this kind of situation. And that's one of the reasons why I find it's so passionate, right? So these are just some of the main customer success charters. And we're actually going to refer here to some of the questions which were already raised. I think there are two aspects to customer success charters. First one is optimizing opportunities. And the second one is reducing risks. Now, unfortunately, for a lot of the companies, particularly startups, it's usually the arrow which is looking down, minimizing risks. Because, and as I said, this is the trigger where a lot of starters actually start to invest in customer success as soon as they see their first signs of churn. So customer success for those kind of startup companies, because they've invested in customer success far too late, the charter is about reducing churn, and that's it. Until they get their churn act together, then they can start thinking about the more positive aspects, which are optimizing opportunities. So let's just run through those. But from a positive standpoint, optimizing opportunities, it would be to nurture customer outcomes. That's the main thing. To retain customers, to increase what we call CLTV, which is an acronym for customer lifetime value. And I'll be looking at an example of that just later on. And really, one of the best things about customer success is to create advocates, so raving fans of your solution and services, who are actually going to be your best sales team, because they're actually going to advocate on your behalf and tell their peers, tell their colleagues, tell their clients, tell their partners, etc. So you're actually going to get probably the best sales team ever through your own clients. And then in terms of minimizing risk, obviously we looked at minimized churn. But also, as a consequence of doing customer success, you're going to rationalize the customer retention and expansion costs. Because, in fact, your customers are going to be so satisfied with what they are receiving in terms of user experience and appropriate experience, that they want to keep on subscribing to your solution, to your services, and probably even want to buy more. So that's going to be upsells and cross-sells. And the other consequence of customer success in minimizing risks is it's going to have a result of actually decreasing your customer acquisition cost. Because in fact, when customer success is really done fantastically well, it means that you're going to be able to identify who are your ideal buyer personas. And this is going to be in turn feeding back into your acquisition process. So you're only actually acquiring customers who have got a real potential to succeed, and thereby it's easier to actually acquire them, and it's easy actually to retain them. So as a consequence, you're going to decrease your customer acquisition cost, because if you're trying to put all your, we know that to run a sales team and to run marketing has always been expensive, but if they are helped thanks to the inputs of the customer success team, then this is going to be easier to do and less costly to do.
This is really super interesting for me, and particularly relevant to one of Annie's questions about how this fits with product manager. So
yes.
I know you said at the beginning it's an overlapping role, but it's really interesting to me that probably 2 or 3 of those core areas you just talked about, for me in the organizations I've worked anyway, this would be product manager remit. This would be their place to think this through. And some of it would also be like the CMO's area to overlap with the more traditional roles.
Yes.
So I know you said it was an overlapping role, but why are all these kind of things which are coming from each of those areas pulled into this one person's role? What's the driver for it? Why wasn't it working with those people handling it before, do you think?
Oh, right. Okay. In fact, the customer success role is not doing all the traditional roles which we previously saw, in fact. What the customer success role is doing is actually feeding into those roles. So the overlap is more like I scratch my back, you scratch mine. It's that kind of effect. So it really is customer success, because they're on the front line and they're actually partnering the clients over, it could be over a period of a year or 2 years, depending on the length of the subscription. They're actually getting inside knowledge and becoming the voice of the customer internally. So, if a customer success manager hears there is a problem, for example, with some kind of persona that is using your solution. And we know that this kind of persona is not an ideal fit for your solution. This information can then feed back into the marketing team. So the marketing team know that, okay, we either have to adapt our pitch, or we no longer have to pitch into this kind of persona. So we need to change our marketing strategy and no longer go after those kinds of customers and personas. So that's just an example. And for the product, for example, permanently, because the customer success manager team is hearing feedback from the customers about the product, or even indeed about the way that we actually are engaging with the customer. So that feedback is continually fed back into the product manager, or the product managers, because there could be several different product managers. We've got several different kinds of products. And that can be fine-tuned, and roadmap can be fine-tuned accordingly. So it really is a situation where I think it's probably the first time where you've actually had somebody who's representing the voice of the customer internally. Does that answer your question, Stuart?
Well, Annie, how does it answer yours?
So here's my question again. Sorry to kind of keep on track, and I'm sorry if I'm eating into your time, but I'm still having trouble with reconciling that there's a need for a customer service, customer success role specifically. Can we not call it a more evolved customer support role where, like you mentioned, it's absolutely important for somebody to represent the voice of the customer and actually be talking to the customers, interfacing with them. But then today's customer support roles are about that. And they're also responsible for setting up automation and gathering feedback and data on the users and providing that back to the product team. Because a lot of this is the user interface, user experience, continuous improvement. These are things that the product team should be handling. You know, there will be a clear overlap and even stepping on toes if customer success, we establish customer success as a role. I think it actually diminishes from being a good product manager, because a product manager needs to really understand their customers. But you're right, a customer support or customer success person may be interfacing more often and regularly and directly with the customers and the users, and providing that information back to the product team. And I mean, that's the way I'm looking at it.
Yes, and that's precisely it. I mean, we're actually coming to an example about the role of customer support and how that is different to customer success. But it's all about the way you're going to reorganize the way the company is actually engaging with your customers. So, you know, product management, of course, they need to know what their customers need and how their customers need to evolve. It depends, again, on the way that you're organized. I've seen companies where the product manager is actually directly right in front of the customer and is actually interviewing customers and the personas which are represented by that customer to actually get the feedback. That's a question of organization and how the company is actually organized. But in some companies, no, the product manager is not necessarily in front of the customer. The product team is dependent on other people to actually feed them with ideas and feedback from the voice of the customer. So it depends how you're organized, I think. Whichever way, I think, you know, the customer success team is always there, is always in front of the customer, and they will always have that feedback. So that's why this role is becoming more and more important. It's not just about the product, but it's also about how your customers are actually achieving those outcomes. So in order for your customer to achieve those outcomes, you not only need to know how they're actually using your product, but you also need to know how those customers are actually working on a daily basis. What are their pain points? What are their challenges in order to arrive to their expected outcomes? So in fact, the role of the customer success manager is more than just a support role, because they really need to understand how those users, how those personas who are actually using your software or solution or services actually need to achieve their outcomes. So it goes beyond just the role of support. So we can actually look at two examples what customer success is not here. This is just, I don't know if you've seen this film. This is a great film which goes back to 1992 called Glengarry, with an absolutely fabulous set of stars in there. One of them, of course, being Alec Baldwin here.
It's how John runs his life, to be honest.
Really? Well, you should know this woman. So I love this film with a cast of stars in there, just incredible. There's Jack Lemmon in there as well. And basically, this is kind of a caricature, I know, of the account management role. But basically, you can see Alec Baldwin in this film with this famous ABC, always be closing. And he very ruthlessly kind of goes in, I don't know if you remember the film, he goes in and says, look, this is what you should be doing, you should be closing, you should be thinking of anything else, you can't drink your coffee until you've actually closed with your quotas and hit your quotas, etc. So it's a bit of a stereotype. But this is all very based on quotas. It's very short term, and it's very vendor centric, because in fact, you know, obviously this is the character of this film, but in fact it's only really focused on actually sales figures, sales quotas short term. We're never really concerned about the outcome of your customers. And then a lot of people equate customer success with customer support. But in fact, it's not. You know, customer support is a very noble role. It needs to exist, but it's very reactive by nature, because in fact, they actually are problem solving. So it's usually, you know, when the customer has some kind of bug, some kind of question, some kind of technical hiccup. So they really are problem solving. So it's very reactive, and it's very product centric, because it's really focused on the product. Okay, so this is what customer success is not. Those two functions still exist, and I think, you know, with customer success, and as I said, being a very mindset approach for the whole company, this is where, you know, traditional functions like account management, sales, and customer support need to be reviewed. So, you know, that everybody is actually contributing to customer success. And we'll see what it is here in this slide. Customer success is more about, okay, your success is our goal. That's basically the mindset of a company who's doing customer success. So it's very proactive by nature. And as I said, it's the first time ever that we've had this opportunity in business to form a partnership between vendors and clients. It should create added value engagement at every interaction. So every time you have an interaction with your clients, whether it be support, whether it be the product manager getting in touch with the client, whether it be automated interaction, whether it be a one-to-one, what we call the QBRs, you know, the quarterly business review between the customer success manager and the client, whatever it is, it should create added value all the time. And this, as a consequence, will create that partnership of win-win outcomes for both you as a vendor and your customers. And so by nature, it's customer-centric, you see. So you see the difference between support and the account management roles, the traditional selling roles, and customer success. So within that light, I'd just like to concentrate now. Before, when we were actually doing business, we had this traditional funnel, which you can see, which was always an organization around marketing, sales, and then post-sales. We've always seen this funnel, right? It's always been represented like this. Here we can see the euros. They start off being quite big, and then they get smaller as your pipeline actually comes towards the sales and the closing. And then the post-sales, you can see you only have €1 here, because traditionally, particularly in the software world, IT world, in fact, all the selling was done up front. So it was that upfront transaction where the majority of the financial gain was actually obtained by the vendors. And then the post-sales, we just had some kind of service level agreements, okay? So there's very minimum amount of actual finance once the post-sales had been accomplished. So this has been revised here with this kind of expanded second funnel. And I've even changed the wording. Before we talk about marketing sales, now we're talking about marketing and acquisition. I haven't used the word sales here because in fact, we are continually selling, if you like. With the new recurring revenue, we're selling all the time. And so this is expansion all the time, which you can see at the bottom here with this retention. So within this retention, we have expansion and renewal. So in fact, this funnel is inversed. And so we have a possibility now to have, on this second slide here, what I call the recurring revenue boomerang. So this is my infographic, which actually shows how, you know, you have the traditional funnel on the left-hand side, the first funnel, with the traditional milestones, awareness, consideration, trial, decision, and then you have the contract. And then on the right-hand side, you have the so-called second funnels. I'm saying in the plural because there are probably more than one. And where you have, from the customer point of view, you have the different milestones. So adoption, performance, transformation, and advocacy. So that those are the four milestones which I like to use from the customer point of view. Because in fact, when a customer is investing in software, for example, or your solution, whatever it is, they'll have the first milestone, which is like an onboarding stage, it's adoption. And then they'll start, after a certain amount of time, start getting the first quick wins, some first performance, which will be measured, of course, with KPIs. And then after that, they'll actually start transforming their teams, transforming their company, because they'll be getting ROI upon their investment. And then they'll start becoming raving fans. And then they'll actually start advocating on your behalf. So as a consequence, you know, we have this boomerang effect where we have plenty of opportunities during this so-called second funnel, when this is actually going to spin around to actually create more revenue, more wealth. So this is why I have this spiral where you see it's a really viral spiral of health and wealth for both you as a vendor and your customers. So that, you know, the opportunities for business now are infinite, I think. So just to give you a little historical.
Sorry to interrupt there. We've got probably 5 minutes or so left on the time available. So how would you like to close out? What's the best use of your slides and time?
Oh, right. Okay. Gosh, time flies when you're having fun, right?
Absolutely. Good question. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So I haven't even got through half of the slideware. So I think very quickly what we could do. I'm just going to go through this because this is important to know why to invest in customer success. So I think I'm going to concentrate just for 1 or 2 minutes on a few slides of why invest in customer success. And then just the remaining 2 to 3 minutes on just a high-level overview of how to do customer success. Does that sound like a good plan, Stuart?
Yeah, great. And at the very end, we've got 3 more questions just to go through quickly before we close out, okay? Okay,
fantastic. So just very quickly, sorry, this slide here. What are the shifts which we're actually witnessing today in the business world, which legitimize customer success and its investment, right? So here are just some of them. We mentioned already the subscription one, but before we're in a push economy, now we're more in a demand economy because customer is king or queen. They have more knowledge about your solutions and about the competitors. So we're more in a demand economy. Before, you know, particularly in the IT world, we were talking about upfront transactions where the financial gain was. Now with subscription, this is spread out over time. Before we were selling products, and now we're no longer selling products, we're selling services, and above all, we're selling outcomes. Before, the power was on the vendor side, and now the power is with the customer. Before, in terms of product development, it was very long-winded. It took, you know, 6 months, 12 months to develop products and to upgrade them. And now with product agility and evolution, then it's easier and it's quicker to do with kind of an agile mindset about developing products. Before, it was very much dictated by the vendor in terms of what was going on the roadmap, whereas now the customers actually contribute to the roadmap. You know, they can provide their feedback directly to the company, either directly to the product manager or the customer success team or whoever. Again, you know, the stakeholders are changing. Before, we're selling to IT, and now we're selling to business stakeholders, and they're often the people who actually retain the budget. Before, and we saw this, we're actually focused on acquisition, and now we're more focused on long-term customer lifetime value, retention, and expansion. So I'm not going to go through this, but I think you will have the slides afterwards, everybody, so you can look at some of these examples of verticals who are actually turning to subscription. And, you know, this is just a few examples, but we know, you know, with Spotify, with Netflix, you know, everybody's turning to subscription. Car manufacturers are turning to subscription. So it's everywhere. It's everywhere. And this necessitates customer success. So I'm going to skip this. You can look at this at your leisure. If you have questions after looking at this, please get back to me. Because I just want to, this is a good one to show you. This is one of the major reasons why we should be investing in customer success. It's what we call the customer lifetime value expansions. This is an example here of a customer who has invested, for example, in some software, and we can see the customer lifetime value that they have bought over the first 3 years. So if you see on the left here, the first turquoise, this is year 1, orange is year 2, and the green is year 3. So you can see the first value, what we call net retention after the first 3 years. So it was 10,000 to begin with, and then in the second year it increased to 12,500, and in the third year to 15,600. That's probably due to the price of the subscription being increased from year to year and the retention that has generated. And then if you see here in the middle, the orange, we can see there's been some kind of upsell or cross-sell for 10,000, and in the third year, sorry, for 15,000. So in fact, the total over 3 years, you can see, is accumulated up to 63,100. So just within the space of 3 years, the customer lifetime value has multiplied by 6. So that is a great example of what you should be doing in terms of expansion. Okay, so I'll just skip this. And just to finish off in the last 2 minutes which are remaining, it's just a very high-level overview of what I call my opt-in to framework of how to go about putting into place a customer success organization. So it's GPS Guide to Performance Success. And this opt-in framework is chronological. You can see you start off with the top 2 pillars, customer centricity and service alignment. Those are very important. And that's where we get customer centricity and customer success ingrained in the DNA of the company. Service alignment, how do we align all those internal existing functions with customer success? And how does everybody help each other to achieve not only the customer outcomes, but the outcomes of your company? And then the opt-in is an acronym based around organization, processes, tools, information, and integration. So the in at the end is squared. And basically it means that when you're actually going into doing customer success, the first thing you have to take into consideration is the organization. You can't consider the tools first. You have to first of all think about the organization. Secondly, the processes. And in parallel to the organization process, you have to think about the information. What is the data? What is the client data that you need to collect? Start off very pragmatically with something very simple. And as you are expanding your organization and processes, start to become more sophisticated around your data and your information. And in the same time, you can see what I call integration at the end. That's also something which takes place in parallel. And that's more about the transformational change management aspects of implementing customer success. So that's my framework, which is developed in some benchmarks afterwards here, which you can have a look at, and on the slide where you can have a look at that. Those are just some examples. It's not exhaustive, just examples of what I'm talking about when I'm referring to organization, strategy, the external processes, the internal processes, etc. And these are all the different kind of things which, as your customer success organization evolves, you'll be putting into place. It's never one-shot operation. It's something which takes place gradually because, you know, it's very, very extensive. There's a lot of information. There's a lot of designing of processes which didn't actually exist before the customer success organization is put into place. So I hope I've respected the time. I don't know if there are any more questions. You said, Stuart, you had 3 more questions.
Yeah, we've got 3 more, so we'll try and rat-a-tat-tat through them.
Yes.
From Raphael, hi, to have someone dedicated to that task, what is the best profile of a person for the role? So yeah, very quickly, what do you think it makes the right attributes for a customer success person?
Yeah, very good question, Raphael. I think for a customer success manager, They have to have domain knowledge. So, if you're selling, for example, CRM software, then it'd be great if that CRM has domain knowledge about sales and marketing or services, depending on the type of CRM that you're selling. So domain expertise is really necessary, because you need to be that trusted advisor who's actually advising about how to work within the domain in which you're operating with your tool. I think also a lot of soft skills are very necessary. So you need to be a very good communicator, a good listener, have lots of empathy, put yourself in the shoes of your customer and know what your customer is talking about, and be able to advise your customer. And I think leadership skills are also important, because you're going to be, especially if you're going to be the first CSM who's going to be hired, it's going to be something, depending on the size of the company, which is transformational to the company. You can see here, it hits the organization, hits the processes. So I think leadership skills are very necessary internally in order to be able to conduct that, but also externally with your customers.
Okay, trying to type as fast as you're speaking there. Thank you. So then the last two from Rajesh. How would you explain to a startup the difference between customer experience, customer care, and customer service? And at what stage of the startup, which of the three takes precedent? That's quite a hard one to answer quickly, but give it your best shot.
Oh, yes, thank you for that question. Just to wrap up. Yeah, I would say that customer experience is part of customer success, because in fact, customer success is really to measure the outcomes. And as part of the journey to get to those customer outcomes, you need to have a fantastic customer experience, right? I would imagine, though, in the case where you are with two companies and both are actually allowing you to achieve your customer outcomes, both equally. And if you have to toss up a coin and decide which one you're going to choose, I think you would choose the one that gives you a better customer experience. So customer experience is important, and it could be, it could be the distinguisher, if you have to make that kind of decision. Customer care, well, customer care, I think for me is another, I think it's just another word that sometimes people are using for customer success. And I think there's a lot of kind of confusion going on between those kind of words. And the last question was about customer support. So for me, customer support, as we just saw on the previous slide there, is more about being reactive. It's more about being product centric. And you're not, with customer support, you're not having this proactive kind of approach that you are with customer success. Okay.
Okay, and then the last question from Rajesh is, what part of marketing budget should be allocated to customer success, or should there be separate funds allocated for the department? And there are literally dogs outside my meeting room, which is why you may hear some.
Yes, yeah, they're joining in as well.
Yeah.
That's a great question, in fact. Yeah, I think a lot of companies are struggling to prove the worth of customer success, simply because a lot of time it's considered as a cost center and not a profit center. So that's a really great question. So I think, yeah, customer success should have a budget. It should be considered as a profit center, not just a cost center. And there should be some kind of number attached to the role of customer success.
Okay. Annie, any last things to chip in?
No, I really agree with that. There needs to be a customer focus in any company, but I think the way I'm feeling is that this role, as a very specific, separate role, perhaps works better in enterprises, larger teams, rather than startups. But that's just my opinion. And I think, especially for startups and growth stage startups or funded startups, all roles have to be customer focused. And the overlap is something that I'm still not comfortable with, how it resolves itself in smaller teams. I can see it working in larger teams, but I still am not convinced that the customer success role as an overlapping role with marketing, with sales, with CEO, with product can function successfully in a smaller team. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, it's not really overlapping. It really is creating synergy. It's really a role which is creating synergy with all the other existing roles. So, the customer success is feeding into all those other roles. And likewise, the marketing and sales is feeding into the customer success. So it really is a bi-directional synergy going on all the time. So that's why it's really important, which comes back to one of the very previous questions which was raised. That's why it's very important to define what are the roles and responsibilities and the scope of all the internal functions. And I think just to come to your first point, Annie, customer success, you know, if it's done properly, it can work fantastic for startups, especially those that want to grow exponentially, because, you know, and we unfortunately didn't have the time to see that. Just to give the example, which is a bit of the role model, which is Salesforce, right? Salesforce, I know it's a fantastic big company, but 80% of their revenue actually comes from the existing client base. They, you know, when they started out, they were a startup about 20 years ago, and that's how they actually grew, because with the story, you know, they first saw their signs of churn, and then they put this customer success team organization into place. So I think that, you know, customer success, if it's done rightly, it has to be adapted, of course, depending on the size of the company, but it can work for big companies, it can work for smaller companies. And as long as you define how customer success is orchestrated with all the other functions and what are the roles and responsibility of those different functions internally, so that each one has a win-win situation.
I think you and Annie may need to set up a separate call to...
I would love to.
John, do you want the last word?
I think my thoughts are very similar to Annie's. I think of a startup as being an organization where many of the officers are learning how to perform in a higher level role than they had in their prior experience. And the fact that it's a startup makes it more challenging because of all the complex things that go on in a startup. So I'm concerned about doing what I see as essentially taking the marketing function and splitting it into two pieces which report separately into a higher level. For example, taking the customer experience responsibility out of marketing and putting it into customer success seems to me to take away part of the responsibility which the marketing executive should have.
It's interesting. It's interesting. It definitely feels like this, to me as well, the scale of the organization really defines when customer success becomes a dedicated function rather than just an embedded piece of everything. And I think we could debate it quite a long time. Like a number of our panel discussions recently has opened us up beyond time. So thank you very much, everybody, to Sue for putting everything together today, for Annie and John for the great questions, and for everybody else, including Rajesh and Raphael, for the great questions on the Q&A. Thank you very much. The video will be available on the Canopy Coaching content area on Slack for anybody who wants to watch it afterwards. And we'll also, in a week or two's time, put it up on the YouTube channel so anybody else can access it and you can share out the links. Sue, I think you're going to add the slides onto the content channel as well, right? So people can have a look at those.
Yes, sure.
Anybody who's watching this who found it interesting, including Annie, if you want to book a session with Sue, she's available on our canopycoaching.as.me portal, so you can set up a half hour with her, a virtual coffee, all right, and try and debate that a bit further. Or Sue, maybe just go around to see Annie in the Jardin Estrella, enjoy their coffee.
I will, but now I know that there's that open co-working space. That sounds fantastic. So yeah, I can join you there, Annie. That'd be wonderful. And John, you're welcome to join us. Huh?
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you very much,
Thank
everybody.
you.
That's been fantastic.
Thanks a lot to everybody. Thank you for listening, everyone. Thank you.